The first session will be the presentation on building trust through addressing the needs of investors. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Uantchern, to deliver the presentation on building trust through addressing the needs of investors. Mr. Low is currently the CEO of Asia Pacific Blackstone PLC. Without further ado, can we put our hands together for Mr. Low, please?
Good morning, everybody. Today, I've only have 10 slides to share with you, and really the three important things in these 10 slides. There are 2 stories and 1 framework. So with these 2 stories and this 1 framework, what I hope to leave behind with you is how to build trust for meeting the needs of the investors and stakeholders within the organization. So just 2 stories and a framework and only 10 slides. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Okay, what I'd like to start with for the first slide is really to share with you a quote from Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple. And I always like this quote because it tells us that sometimes we can't connect the dots when we look forward. Like at this point in time, many of you will be thinking, what is Uantchern going to present to you when he talks about telling you 2 stories and 1 framework? How do 2 stories and a framework help you to understand how to build trust for meeting the needs of investors? So at this point in time, you may be a little bit confused as to how the dots connect, but let me assure you, by the time we finish the 10 slides, you'll be able to connect the dots as to how to build trust for meeting the needs of your stakeholders. So be patient, it's only 10 slides. And like I said, there are 2 stories and a very good framework that all you can take back and implement within your organization. Next slide. The clicker doesn't seem to work. Okay, the next slide that I wanted to share with you is for the first story. And this first story is about Mount Everest. And without a doubt, everybody in this room, and I'm sure everybody in this room, know what is Mount Everest. Mount Everest is the highest mountain in the world. It is 8,848 meters high, 8848. That's a nice number. But for most of us, we don't know how high 8848 is. When I tell you it's 8,848 meters high and it's the highest mountain in the world, you don't know how high is high. So let me put that into context. The height of the Mount Everest is the same height as the cruising altitude of a jet plane 747. So next time you're inside the aeroplane and you go on your holiday or you go on a business trip, and the moment you hear the pilot say, you may now take off your seat belt, but if there's any danger, please put it on. That is how high Mount Everest is. It is high. And to climb Mount Everest takes a lot of effort. And the first story I want to share with you is about how difficult it is to climb Mount Everest. So I'm going to play a video for you as the first story. And this is based on the real story. It's an exciting story, but at the same time, it also begs you to ask the question, why would you want to climb Mount Everest, which is the highest mountain in the world? So let's watch the first video and the first story. This movie is, of course, called Everest. It's based on a true story that happened in 1996. And Mount Everest has not been climbed just by a few people. It's been climbed by over 4,000 people. So it's not as if it's not well climbed. But climbing Mount Everest is a challenging task. As you saw from the movie, people can face a lot of dangers. Like, for example, you see those people crossing those crevasses, those holes in the ground, we call it crevasses, and they use ladders to cross the crevasses. But beyond that, it takes a long time to train to climb Mount Everest. It takes a couple of years to train, and it's not about physical fitness, it's about mental strength. Because Mount Everest, imagine if you go on a plane, it's so high up, and beyond 8,000 meters, there's insufficient oxygen in the air. So why would you climb Mount Everest when there's no oxygen beyond 8,000 meters, and Mount Everest is 8,840 meters? And not only that, not only is it high, it takes a lot of time, but it's also very expensive to climb Mount Everest. So on average, it costs about US $40,000 to climb Mount Everest. At the same time, 10% of people who climb Mount Everest don't make it. On the mountain on Mount Everest, there are a lot of dead bodies because people die from climbing Mount Everest. So the challenge that you ask yourself is like, why? And you saw the movie, and I encourage all of you to watch the movie. Why do you want to climb Mount Everest? And a lot of climbers cannot give the answer. They give a simple answer sometimes, and they say, well, we climb Mount Everest because it's there. And that's one thing that I want you to remember at this point in time. What is your why? And within this first story and how it links to the framework and how the dots connect, is asking yourself, what's your mission, what's your vision, and what's your purpose? Your mission may be that you want to climb Mount Everest, and your purpose is asking yourself, why do you want to climb Mount Everest? It's dangerous. As you watch a movie, it's painful. I got to ask the question, why? And if you look at this map of Mount Everest, if you look at base camp, and everybody have heard about Mount Everest Base Camp or EBC, Everest Base Camp. It takes about 1 week just to get to Everest Base Camp. And base camp is over 5,000 meters, and that's pretty high. But from base camp to the summit, it's not so simple as just going from the base camp to Camp 1, and you look at the picture to Camp 2, Camp 3 to Camp 4. We got to do what we call acclimatization, because if you go directly from base camp to the summit, you suffer from this thing called mountain sickness. And mountain sickness is water in the lungs and water in the brains. And whether it's water in the lungs or water in the brains is not very good for the human beings. And not only that, there's no oxygen. So there's a lot of dangerous things that can happen when you climb Mount Everest. And if you look at the next slide, the reason why I can share with you is because I've been there. I've not achieved the height of Mount Everest yet, but this is me during a training program that I'm planning to climb Mount Everest in the year 2020. So as you can see there, I'm crossing a ladder. And this ladder is a simple aluminum ladder. It's the same ladder that you use to climb your rooftop or to do painting. But this ladder is tied together with simple ropes. But when you fall into the crevasse, which is the thing underneath the ladder, there's no way that you can come out from the crevasse. But you can see safety line. But yet, at the same time, you know that the safety line is no use, because once you fall in, nobody's going to pull you up, because it's too difficult to come out of the crevasse because it's that deep. So with that first story, let me share with you how that start to link to the framework. Now, Mount Everest is something that is high, is dangerous, but so is a corporate mission, so is a corporate vision, so is a corporate purpose. What is your why? Where do you want to go, and how do you get there? This is what we call together collectively, we call it the tone at the top. And Mount Everest story, the first story that I want to share with you, links to the framework by asking yourself, what is your why in terms of your corporate mission? And let me share with you how the story linked to the framework. The next slide, please. So the first part of the framework, I can see at the top here, is what we call the tone at the top. All of us in our corporate mission, if you look at your annual reports, have this thing called the mission, the vision, and sometimes they have the purpose. But the challenge is that the purpose tend to be missing in many organizations, and this is where the dots start to join up. When you talk about establishing trust for the needs of your investors, the first thing that the investor will ask you is that, why? So why do you want to achieve this mission? Why do you have this vision in mind within an organization? What is the tone at the top with regards to the why? So the first part of the lesson, and when this dot start to connect with this first story, is to ask yourself, when you want to establish trust, the very important part that's missing in many organizations is that purpose statement. What is your why? And it sounds simple, but this is very difficult to answer. Just like if you ask any mountain climbers, why would you want to climb 8,840 meters? Why would you climb to a level where there's no oxygen? And even if you will reach the summit, what have you really achieved? Self-glory? Or have you made a difference in the world? So what is your why? The purpose statement is really asking yourself and telling your investors what is the impact you have made with regards to achieving the objective that you have in mind. So the word that we have in mountain climbing, we call it summit fever. Summit fever means that you want to achieve the summit at all costs. But is that really the objective that you're going to achieve? Sometimes things go wrong, like you saw in the movie. It's not every time that you achieve the mountain. Sometimes weather, sometimes injury, sometimes your colleagues is not feeling well. You can't achieve the summit. But is that the only objective that you have in mind in terms of wanting to climb your Mount Everest? So the first layer of this framework, the tone at the top, is really asking yourself, what is your why? What is your purpose in terms of meeting the needs of the investors? Because if you can't answer your why, then you wouldn't be able to achieve that foundation in terms of establishing trust. Now, the second part of the framework that I wanted to share with you as you remember the story of Mount Everest is value creation. And who are your stakeholders? Who are your investors? Even if you want to establish your purpose and you understand why you want to climb your Mount Everest in terms of achieving your mission and your vision, and you understand why you want to do it, the next question in terms of the layer of that framework that I want to share with you and how to connect the dots is really what value have you created? And if you look at most code of corporate governance, including the Thai code, the Singapore code, the Malaysian code, the UK code, the phrase value creation has become embedded in all these codes. But a lot of us don't understand how does value creation come into play. Now, the center part of this middle part of the framework is really the strategic objectives. All of us understand that when you run organizations. Strategic objectives is how do you get there? And strategic objectives are linked to your mission and a vision. But value creation is linked to what outcomes have you created for your stakeholders or your investors. If you look at the right-hand side of this diagram, there are two important boxes that you see in terms of connecting the dots: outputs and outcomes. And what have you achieved for the stakeholders? If you're able to distinguish what's an output, meaning that what you create, and outcomes, what's the impact have you created for the right stakeholders, then you have created value for those stakeholders. Thank you. I hope we had a good break, and I really pray for the gentleman that he's fine. So let me continue with where we stopped. We started with about joining the dots, and at this point in time, we probably think about, okay, maybe some of the dots do connect together. We started with the first story, the first of the two stories about climbing Mount Everest, and how the first part of the framework is setting the tone at the top. So when you build trust, or you want to build trust to meet the needs of your investors, the first thing that you need to think about, really what is the tone at the top? Why is your why? Why do you want to climb Mount Everest? Or what is your, the decision about what is your Mount Everest is easier as compared to what is your why. What is your why? Meaning purpose. Now the second part of the framework is really value creation. And like I said before the tea break, value creation is probably one of the biggest things in the evolution of the code of corporate governance. The Thai code has it, the UK code, the Singapore code, the Malaysian code. So the phrase value creation is extremely important when it comes to connecting the dots in terms of building the trust for your investors, in meeting their needs of the investors. So when you want to build the trust for your investors, you need to make sure that you have the right tone at the top. What is your why? The second part is really what value do you create? And what do you mean by value creation? And value creation is linked to outcome. Outcome is linked to output. So to be able to distinguish between output and outcome, and for the right stakeholders, is part of that journey to creating trust for the needs of your stakeholders. So this second part of this framework, this middle part, the center part is important. Strategic objectives, all of us know that. But the left side, value creation, this is something that everybody in this room need to focus on. If anything else, value creation is probably the most important part about creating trust to meet the needs of your investors, of your stakeholders. And value creation is linked to outcomes for the right stakeholders. So that's important. So the next part of the slides I wanted to share with you, the third part of the framework is about the foundation, meaning that what are the values? So values like, do you believe in what you do? So if you don't believe in what you do, you don't have what we call a culture that is adopted by the entire organization. And culture is also another important part of the codes. The Thai code, the Singapore code, the Malaysian code, the UK code. In fact, if you read the latest version of the UK Code of Corporate Governance that was revised in 2018, all the board of directors, the chairman, is required to report on the culture of the organization. So can you imagine, the chairman of the board in the UK of all listed companies must report on the culture of the organization. So this part of the framework here, if you have the right values, and if everybody believes in the right values, we have what we call a culture within the organization. Culture is something what people believe in. If you believe in the things together, it's called a corporate culture. They're still trying to figure out. So let me just recap a little bit while they're fixing the slides. The tone at the top is important to understand the why. The tone in the middle is important for value creation. The lower part of the framework is really understanding a shared culture within the organization. If you watch the movie Everest, one of the challenges is not just going up the mountain, but coming down. And in the climbing world, there's this phrase that we use called turn around. When the weather is bad, when you're tired, when the conditions are not perfect, it's not always correct to reach the summit, because you must remember the success of climbing a mountain is not about going up and reaching the summit, it's about coming down safely also. So if you watch the movie Everest, many of the people in there did not make it down because they tried too hard to reach the summit, and the tone at the top was just too strong. So you must remember, the tone at the top drives behavior in the center in terms of what values do you share and what's the culture within an organization. And if you look at the word sustainability, that's another important development in the listed companies in terms of how they want to go for long-term thinking. Now, the organization is not sustainable if there's no culture that's understood and accepted within the organization. And sustainability is important for long-term thinking within the organization. So you have it, the tone at the top, the value creation, and the right culture within the organization. And finally, the tone at the bottom, just as important as the tone at the top. Do the people believe in what they do within the organization? If they don't believe in what they do, then how is the tone at the top going to be achieved? So the dots will connect in terms of how you understand, in terms of creating trust for the stakeholders, for the investors within the organization. I think they're trying to reboot the system. Okay, here we go. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is how finally it all connects, and this is all in the presentation slides that you have, you can download. And this is how the dots connect looking backwards. If you look at the tone at the top, the tone at the top is about setting your mission, your vision, which almost all organizations in Singapore, in Thailand, in Malaysia, in the UK, everybody knows about setting your mission and vision. It's easy. But the difficult part about the tone at the top is really the purpose. Why do you want to climb your Mount Everest? Even if you can call it your objective, the question is why? And then the second part of the framework is understanding value creation. And that's linked to the why. Because even if you climb Mount Everest, what's the outcome? Once you get to the top, that's what I call an output. Getting to the top of your Mount Everest is an output. But what's the outcome? Outcome meaning that what's the impact on the stakeholders? What's the impact on your investors? What does it mean for the investors when you reach your Mount Everest? And in a nutshell, that is called value creation. That's the center part of the framework. The almost last part of the framework is about having the right culture, having the right values. And this is where the word sustainability comes into play. If you don't believe in what you do and you don't have a shared value, the organization will not be sustainable going forward in the long run. Many people think that sustainability is about ESG, is about emission, is about carbon emission, carbon saving, carbon footprint. But it's more than that. It's about, are you willing to do it again and again and again? So climbing Mount Everest, like I said in my earlier slide, it's not about going from base camp all the way to the summit one way. You got to go to camp 1, then come down. You got to go to camp 2, go back to camp 1, and then go back to base camp. This is what we call acclimatization, in order to avoid, as I mentioned earlier, mountain sickness, so that you don't get water in the lungs, you don't get water in the brain. So do you believe in going up and down multiple times before you reach Mount Everest? That's called sustainability. And the lowest part of the framework that you see here is really, do the people believe in what you do? Do you have the right structure, the right equipment, the right people? And have you made a difference? So you put this whole framework together, the dots start to connect. Because if you have the wrong tone and the people don't believe in what you do, then you will not achieve value for the stakeholders. So if you look at this diagram here, it is not a simple diagram. In fact, it took me 2 years to develop this diagram, but I truly believe that this diagram, if you look at it carefully, will help you establish trust for the needs of your stakeholders. And you look at the top part, it's left to right. Having the right vision, the right mission, and supported by the right purpose is left to right, the green part. The red part is from right to left. If you can choose the right stakeholders and identify the right stakeholders and understand what outcomes you want to achieve for them, then you achieve value creation on the left-hand side. So the blue part is left to right, the red part is from right to left, and then the blue part, the dark blue part, is once again from right to left again. If for an organization to be sustainable in the long run, you've got to make sure that people have the right culture and share the right values so that you achieve long-term thinking. And then at the bottom, do the people believe in what they do? Have you got the right structure? And have you made a difference? So left to right, right to left, and this is where it starts to get complicated. It's also from bottom to up. If the people don't believe in what you do, then the tone at the top doesn't make sense. So it's also from bottom to up, left to right, right to left, and also from top to bottom. So all parts of this diagram are connected. And in one way or the other, you cannot live without one part or the other. So you need to see where you're going, the tone at the top. You want to climb Mount Everest. You need to believe in it, and you need to make sure that the structure supports it carefully. Now, the last slide I want to share with you, next page, is really my parting quote with you is that not only must you believe in what you can see, but you must believe in your heart that what you want to achieve is the right thing to do. Now, this is the second story that I wanted to share with you, and you compare it to the first story. So the first story is about climbing the highest mountain in the world, 8848. It's really high. This second story is climbing the same mountain, but this time it's by a man who is completely blind. So he sees not with his eyes, but he submits it based on what he believes in, which is his heart. So to achieve trust, to meet the needs of the stakeholders, not only must you help people see where they want to go, but they must believe that you have it in your heart, the right thing, that you want to do the right thing for the organization. So this video, once again, is about a completely blind man. If you think about it, the first video that you saw, the people crossing the ladder across the crevasses, and those people can see. You saw a photo of me crossing the crevasse, so we can see. And in this next video, this person cannot see. So which is worse? Being able to see how far I can fall, or not being able to see how far I can fall, but believe in it that you can reach the top? It's the last. Yes, thank you. If you watch the first story, when they cross the ladder across to the crevasses, you can see how challenging it is. But in the second story, it's the same mountain, but he can't see. And this is how your investors feel. They can't see because you're the one that sets the tone at the top. So the people within the organization, we are the people that can see. We know where the ladders are. We know where the crevasses are. We can see the mountain. We can see how dangerous it is. But for the investors, they can't see because they're very far away. But they trust you. They trust you to cross the ladder. They trust you to lead them to the top of the mountain. So they trust you with their hearts. So the two stories come together. You must go to the mountain with what you can see and also with how your heart feels. And once these two come together in that framework, where the tone at the top creates value for the stakeholders in terms of establishing the trust, then the dots will connect. So you can't see the dots looking forward. So when you cross the crevasses, you can't see how it will come together. But you must believe in your investors, you must believe in your stakeholders, and that's where you achieve trust in the long run for the stakeholders. So with that, I hope that you've enjoyed the two stories. The slides are available. You can download the two videos. I encourage you to watch the movie. It's a real story. Both stories, in fact, are very real, what you can see and what you cannot see. And I hope that I plan to climb Mount Everest in 2020. That's my target. And my purpose, my why, is not really to reach the summit, but to share with everybody in this room and to share with my kids that if you want to do it, you can do it. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Low. And we will carry out the program as said. Thank you so much.